Mark Carney's hope that the King Charles coming to open Parliament would give Mark Carney some legitimacy seems to have backfired, as 83% of the country doesn't seem to care at all. In addition to that, the mainstream media attacking Alberta has put over half of the country on their side. All that and more. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I have to be honest, as a Gen X, I don't care much for the liberal theater. I believe action speaks louder than words. That is what got us to the pinnacle of what we were at. I'm going to pretend and I'm going to put on a lot of theater and I'm going to do nothing. And as things go down, 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 I'm going to pretend like they're not going down, 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 because then I don't have to do anything that this current generation seems to tolerate. I don't understand. And I will never understand, because I'm not telling you got to be perfect, but you have to accomplish what you set out to do. Like, you have to say, I'm going to fix this. You have to be able to fix it. Of course, Mark Carney is all about the theater because he's very far left. And so he thinks bringing King Charles over here for the first time in however many years to open Parliament is going to somehow send a significant message to the Canadian population that he's legitimate, that the king is behind him. However, the king seems to be more in bed with Donald Trump than he is with Mark Carney. And the Canadian population doesn't seem to be behind him in any way, shape, or form. And I don't mean just Quebec. King Charles is coming to open Parliament at the behest of Mark Carney, and Angus Reid did a poll on how Canadians in general feel about it. I think that the results are pretty eye-opening, or at least lay bare the facts of the country. Royally indifferent, 83% of Canadians say they don't care that King Charles will deliver throne speech. Despite the apathy, more say monarch speech is a good thing, 37%, that then bad, 23%. But that's not really an accurate question. And that still means that even at those numbers, 40% said I don't care. And I think that that's a significant number to say that I don't really care. Anyway, so there was an opinion poll, and then they asked him overall, and they asked him in many of the different regions of the country. And you can see, what is your reaction to King Charles delivering the throne speech? Overall, it's 83% that say they don't care. It doesn't bother them in any way, shape, or form. Of course, we can say, like when I first started this channel, very few people were paying attention to politics because politics had yet to crush their lives. Now that the politicians are crushing their lives, they are, of course, paying full-blown attention, which, of course, is the flaw that the Liberal Party brings onto themselves. Most of the time, you do better when you have a population that's not invested in your actions. That's what's going to make it really difficult for the current sitting Liberal government, is that everyone is watching. And that's great. I believe in an educated, politically educated population, because that's the only way to keep them in check. If they don't think that you're watching, they will do whatever they want. If you're watching their every move, they will tiptoe around and make sure that they can get everybody's permission before they do a thing. And that is what responsible government is about. Keeping an eye on them, watching them. We get to this apathy where we trusted that they were going to do the right thing by us. And now look, we're into 30% hunger and poverty in this country. 30%, 1 in 3. Anyway, two different stories going on here. Okay. So you can see the poll in British Columbia, 82%. In Alberta, 88%. In Saskatchewan, 89%. I mean, the numbers are pretty high. In Quebec, it's 90%, but I mean, it's not that far off in Alberta or Saskatchewan. And I think that we can see there that there's just no significant, that's not going to pull a lot of people onto Mark Carney's carpet and say, oh, look, he got the king to come. Nobody's like, people are like, whatever, I'm hungry over here. Get me a house I can afford. Another civil service union is going on strike. This one is the first time they've ever had a strike. First ever WSIB strike affects hundreds of employees in Northern Ontario. More than 1,000 employees in Northern Ontario responsible for helping injured workers were on the picket lines Friday. Workers walked off the job Thursday following months of stalled contract negotiation with the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, WSIB. It's the first strike in the organization's 100-year history. So this, for most people, is going to be what's known as workers' comp. And if you're in Quebec, it's CSST. These are the individuals that talk to you when you're injured on the job. These are the guys that are the people that make sure your checks flow, that you're getting your your physio and those kinds of things that are taken care of, so that you're getting all of your ducks in a row, that the doctors are getting all the notes together in case you are seriously injured. There are degrees of injury at job. Nonetheless, it's important. What I believe is important for people that are living in Ontario and Canadians as a whole is that you are now looking at yet another union who feels that they're not being paid enough because of the cost of living. Now, Mark Carney will try to say, well, we'll pay them more now they can afford it. But that's not how it works. Affordability means that everybody can do it. That's the secret to affordability. If it's affordable, then everybody can buy it. If it's only affordable to a select few of people, that's a completely different word. Let's go back to the article. Emotions are running high at intersection of two places where 25 WSIB workers walked the picket line. They were joined by workers in nearly a dozen cities across the province, including Timmins, Sudbury, North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, and Thunder Bay. The union represents 3,600 workers across the province who have been without a contract since the end of April. Members voted 96% in favor of a strike. So everybody's upset. You got 96%. I mean, I don't know who the 4 people are that, like the 4% of people where they might have worked, but I can say with certainty that if 96% of people say they want a raise and they're upset, the working conditions, the morale, all of that are down. Meaning that whenever you give them something, there's going to be only hostility and bitterness in response when the government comes to them and asks them for anything. I'm not saying the guy or the individual who's been injured is getting that kind of flack, but the people that pay them, they are absolutely getting that kind of flack. I wouldn't want to be the minister of, I don't know which minister looks after this, but that person is probably getting an earful every second day. Now, there are a couple of things that I want everyone to know about. First of all, one of the issues is that this WSIB is offloading jobs into the United States. They're taking the information and they're storing it in a computer bank in the United States. What do you mean? I thought we were in the middle of a war with the United States. I thought we were in the middle of a trade war. I thought they were taking all of our industry and we're not going to be sending any of our money down there. I mean, I've heard all of this coming out of both Mark Carney and Doug Ford. And this is Doug Ford who's sending this information down to, I believe they're going somewhere in Boston to store the information. Why? Why is Doug Ford not talking about building an AI center in Sault Ste. Marie? I don't know where, but somewhere. Not Toronto. Everything goes in Toronto. I'm sick of it. Just we got to spread out. We got to spread out. Now, the other problem is that they came to the union and said, we'll give you a 4.5% raise over 3 years. And they're like, wait a minute, inflation has gone up like 9% in the last 3 years. So that's not even meeting the cost of living. And now the union has left the table. They're like, no, forget it. You're not going to talk to us. Like, if you're not going to treat us fairly, we're leaving. And this is, flowing back and forth. And then, of course, in the middle are people who are injured, who cannot work, who are still filling out documentation or might be injured today and still have to come into work. I do not agree that they've offered them enough money, but that is the cost of living can work 2 ways. If we can bring the price of everything down, then people will feel better at work, right? Of course, our leadership is not going to be too good at that, obviously, by their track record. And there's no way I can justify anybody sending our data into the United States any more than I can justify them sending our data into China or our data into Norway. It's our data. It needs to stay here. It needs to work here. We need to have the buildings and the businesses and the employees in Canada. Canada first. That's the only way we're going to repair our economy. We're in for a bad recession coming no matter what happens. So we have to get things on the ground so that we can have something to build from. And you would think that somebody in the government who ran around saying, I'm going to take on Trump, in the case of Doug Ford, well, you would think that he would be aware of that. Speaking of the downward spiral of the Canadian economy and the incoming recession, after the finance ministers of the G7 met in Banff, Tiff Macklem, the governor of the Bank of Canada, made a statement talking about his projections on the economy. I believe that he tried to slide it in quietly because he realizes that it's about to fall through the floor. I got this from Reuters. Bank of Canada head warns of weak growth if tariff uncertainty persists. Now, I'm getting a little tired of everybody talking about how Donald Trump is uncertain or erratic. Donald Trump you can set your watch to the way that he's behaving. He wants something. If you don't give it to him, then this is going to happen. If you tell him you're going to do it and then change your mind, then this is going to happen. It's very simple. If you tell him you're going to do it, he'll give you this to happen. But as it pertains to Canada, because he has all of the same things that we have, he sees us as a direct competition, and he's not going to give us any of the things that we think that is going to happen. So those tariffs are not going anywhere, which means that it's no longer uncertain. It's very certain. It's certain that they're not going to go anywhere. And if they do go anywhere, they will bottom out at 10%, just like China and so many other places in the world. Canada has to stop asking themselves if the Americans are going to ever, come back to the table and just start building Canada. And as a result, because the Liberal government doesn't know what they're doing and Doug Ford doesn't know what they're doing, we are going to fall hard. But how are we going to pick ourselves up? How are we going to dust ourselves off? That's what we need to be talking about. Anyway, I'll go back to the article. The Governor Macklem says the Q2 GDP will be much weaker than he had, because he took these numbers and he said, oh, look, it's not going to be that good. It was the projection was only going to be 1.1%. Like that's what he was hoping for when he made his last announcement. And if it's much weaker than 1.1%, that's not, oh man. Oh, that's terrible. Q3 could be worse if uncertainty around tariffs continues again. There's no uncertainty. What is certain is that those tariffs are staying there, and we have to be doing something about that. Stop looking in the past. Let's get going. Canada first. Canadian industry. Got to get now, of course, the biggest problem with Canadian industry is we have the net zero crazy people in the way. Refrained from giving an outlook for the GDP after Q2. That last one's important. That means the Bank of Canada governor is not going to tell us if the economy will rebound after the second quarter results. It's not going to. I mean, it could if we didn't have the net zero people in the way and we were allowed to spend the summer building things and we're allowed to spend the summer to get things up and running. But of course, all they want to do is talk about it. I'm going to talk to you here in a minute how people are going to pick it up north. I mean, you can't say fix everything and then get in the way of what's going to fix it. Make a decision and just stay there. Just one decision, stay on one side of the argument, and that's it. That's all. Though I don't know why you would elect to live in poverty. Not sure what that's all about. Well, speaking of the mining and Bill 5 and the far left's desire to have their cake and eat it too, I got this from CTV News. Road, rail, and mine blockages could be on the horizon, First Nations leaders said Monday, as they ratchet up pressure on the Ontario government to kill a proposed bill that seeks to speed up large mining projects in the north. Provincial ministers, meanwhile, said they have heard the outcry and will make improvements to Bill 5, but stopped short of suggesting they would eliminate it outright. That's correct, because we need the money. They were campaigned on the idea of solving the problem through one of the ways that we're going to solve the problem is through mining rights. One of the ways that we're going to fix the problem is by unlocking the north. Now, you're sitting there your whole life up north saying that the government of Canada didn't give you clean water, didn't give you a paved road, didn't give you a decent this, didn't give you a decent that. Here you have an opportunity to say to them, I want all of these things, and then here's the mining rights. I want a 5% cut. Everyone in my thing can split the 5%, but in my whole band can split the 5%, but we want 5% coming our way. We want assurances that you'll recover the land, you'll put the trees back in, you won't make any of the water dirty. And these mining companies, they know how to keep it all clean. They know, they've learned. It's not 1950 anymore. They are well aware of what to do and what not to do. They have technicians, they have engineers, they know exactly what they're doing. And they will make sure that nothing gets dirty. They will make sure that all the trees go back into the ground. They will make sure that they buy you paved roads. They will make sure that all of those things that happen. We can look in many regions of Canada where people that are living that are First Nations living near these developments are getting paid well. They're getting paid well enough to live well, to live decently. And you're always talking about how expensive it is. You're always saying how there's no cell phones, there's no doctors, there's no inexpensive food. Well, the only way that you're going to get those things is by unlocking it, by bringing everything up north. And you can't let the small few people, the special interest groups, by stopping the productivity that is available to all Canadians by not mining, but by unlocking the north. That's what we're talking about here. Once the mines have come and got their stuff, what's left behind is what matters. So what's left behind will be townships. What's left behind will be schools. What's left behind will be hospitals and population. We only need to look at, like, say, northern Alberta to understand how that works, or northern British Columbia. We can see that once you go there, people go there. If you build it, they will come. Now, running around, getting in the way, throwing your car across the railroad tracks, that's not going to solve any problem. That's just going to make everybody else poor. Why would you voluntarily sit in poverty and then complain that nothing gets fixed? Just sit down at the table, tell them how much money you want and how many jobs you want, and the problem will be solved. Now we'll talk about how the mainstream media thought they were clever, and it has backfired on them as over the Alberta question. Over half of Canadians say they understand Alberta separatism, a new poll suggests. More than half of Canadians say they understand why Alberta might want to split from Canada, even if 2/3 of them say that they don't want it to happen. But, I mean, 2/3 means, well, yeah, I don't want it to happen, but I get it. I understand why you're going. That's over half. That's 55%. And when you have 55% of anything, that's majority. When it comes to Albertans, 70% of them said they understand why their province might want to become an independent country. The poll suggests 63% of men say Alberta separatism, while 48% of women report the same. While 77% of Conservative voters said they understand the reasons behind separatists, only 48% of the Liberal supporters responded the same way. The other day, there was a meeting between what they called the Western Premiers, and it had all of the territories, as well as Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. And even British Columbia was saying that they were in support of the resource development. Now, unfortunately, the Premier of the Premier of British Columbia, he says whoever's in the room, right? He has this very small attention span. So he'll say, because he's surrounded by premiers in the Western provinces, he'll say, oh yeah, I support it. And then as soon as Mark Carney comes to town, he's like, oh yeah, no, I support that. He doesn't seem to really have much of a position except for vote for me. Otherwise, most of the will of the Western provinces seems to be behind development. The people up north are going to choose development over any of it because what they want is a strong economy. When you live every day with nature creeping at the door, when you know that you're only a couple of degrees away from freezing, you have a very strong opinion on how much money you make, how it's made, where it goes, and who gets their hands on it. Of course you would. It's way different than living in the inner city. You can rest assured if you don't know firsthand. I believe that what we need to see here is that it's 2 years until they have the referendum put on the ballot. The election coming in Alberta will be when they have the referendum put on the ballot, even if the Liberal government does a complete 180, abandons everything they've written down in a book and abandons everything they were talking about when they climbed the CN Tower. If they do a complete 180 on the net zero, the question and the petition and the names could still be put onto the ballot in 2027, which is when the provincial election happens. This could be a real issue for Alberta. This is really going to be a big problem for the Liberal government. And we can see how, for all of the desire of the mainstream media to try and turn the country against Alberta, despite ignoring the constant and insistent demands of the federal party of the Bloc Québécois that they be allowed to leave the country, which is a very strange juxtaposition. When they have Alberta, it's a big deal, but when it's in Quebec, they say nothing. So that means to me that I don't have any respect for your argument. See, that's what you hear coming out of my voice right now, my complete lack, or my mountain of contempt that I have for anybody who tries to stir up trouble over the same issue, but treats one side different than the other. There's no such thing as equality if you're treating people differently based on where they live or what language they speak. That, to me, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it will never make any sense, no matter what you try to say. I do, however, see that Alberta has a lot of support, much more than the mainstream media would want you to believe. And I further see that support is a quiet support. Like, they're not interested in what anybody's trying to say. They're not interested in throwing the name like Trump around. They're not interested in what David Eby thinks. They simply want to be treated properly. They want to make sure that their paychecks are coming in. They want to make sure that their family is safe, secure, and fed. And I don't, in my life, For all the places that I've traveled, I've never understood anybody who thinks that a person's going to sacrifice that for an ideology. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.